Hello, my name is Jared Barnick and I am from WPFsharp.com, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how to create a new WPF application, your first WPF application. We're in Visual Studio 2012 and we're going to come up here and select File, New, Project. Or you could press Control-Shift-N to get the new project window open. And that opens this window. It says New Project. Over here we can search for the template we want to find, and we want to find a WPF application, which is under the Visual C# templates. It can also be found specifically under the Windows template. Now, it also will ask us for a name, location, and solution name, which are already populated for us. I'm going to go ahead and change this to be First WPF Application. And I'm going to click OK, and our WPF application will be generated. Now, when our WPF application is generated, it will automatically open mainwindow.xaml and mainwindow.xaml.cs, which are basically our starting point for anything we're going to do. Now, it's not exactly our starting point. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the solution and this project. First, we have a solution, and underneath that solution is a project. This project has properties. It has 3 files: assemblyinfo.cs, resources.resx, and settings.settings. We're not going to discuss those in this tutorial. It also has references. For a WPF Sharp application, the importance references are Presentation Core, Presentation Framework, System.xaml, and Windows Base. These are the 4 important libraries that allow WPF and XAML applications. Our app.config will show us what .NET Framework version we're running, and our app.xaml is our entry point. There's actually, your public static void main method is in a automatically generated class in the obj directory, and it will call this application class and tell it to load up, and if it has a startup URI configured, which it does, it will load whatever's in the startup URI, which in this case is mainwindow.xaml, and that is why mainwindow.xaml is basically our starting point. Alright, now let's take a look at our first WPF application. We have a graphical user editing tool, kind of a WYSIWYG, and we have some XAML down here, which is very XML, HTML looking, and that's pretty much what it is. If you're familiar with WYSIWYGs and other things, this works very similar. We can go ahead and drag things to our screen, and notice they show up down here in XML. What we're going to do is we're going to create a first name and last name form. Very simple application for our first time. So we're going to have 2 labels, a first name and a last name label. And of course, we're going to need some text boxes to enter the first and our last name in. And as you notice, I didn't worry about placing these perfectly. I just kind of threw them up here. And that's because Visual Studio gives us a lot of features with the way we can edit this. I can just put columns and rows around my files. I can press Ctrl-A to select everything, and I can reset my layout, and everything is now perfectly where I want it. I now can do some more work with the rows and columns. Let's set this column size to auto, and it will only take up the needed space based on its children. I can do the same thing for these rows. I can set these rows to auto, and they will only take up the space needed based on their children. And there we go. Now it looks a lot better. It looks more like a first name and a last name app. Let's go ahead and remove the default text in our text blocks, and we will build and run. There we go. Here's our main window, and it has a first name and a last name field that we can type in. Now we haven't done anything in code yet. All we've done is edit the UI. We can, just like we edit the UI, we can edit the code. And let's talk about the code for a second. This is the code behind mainwindow.xaml.cs. I'm using ReSharper, and ReSharper has a nice feature to show me which usings are needed, and it kind of dims out things that aren't needed. We don't need on a partial class to remind us what class it's inheriting from. We already know this from the XAML, that our main window is a child of window. So we don't need to repeat that here, and if we don't repeat that here, we don't need any of these using statements. In fact, we don't need anything in here at all because it's a partial class and really has no information that's necessary. If we notice, if we delete everything and build and run, our application still functions exactly as it did before. The XAML has created our object enough that we don't need this. However, we might need this. Let's say that we wanted to pre-populate these two values with a first name and a last name. Well, I am going to paste in a little person object I have. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create an instance of this person class. And I've already created a little snippet that I just pasted in that creates a new person. And with this new person, we want to assign the first name and the last name values to these text boxes. However, in order to access these, we need to give them names. So here we have our first name text box, and we'll go ahead and copy that and give this a last name text box. Now we can come in here and we can say first name text box dot text equals the first name, and the last name dot text box dot text equals the last name. And now we go ahead and build and run our project, and you will see that the first name and last name fields are populated. Now we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit later about how to keep these in sync using binding to keep the data on the back end and the data on the front end in sync. We're not going to cover that in this tutorial, but we're going to cover that in another tutorial. In this tutorial, we've covered how to create your first WPF application, how to enter things into the XAML and kind of set up your XAML. We've also covered how to add code to the code behind. And this has been Jared Barnick with WPF Sharp. Thank you for watching this video.